Carling, your name's all over the papers and websites and everything else up here today for reasons that I'm sure is kind of bittersweet for you because it was already 30 years ago. But of course, Eugenie Bouchard is just getting rave reviews up here and has done for several years now that she's come to the attention of the general public, not guys like you who are inside the game. But of course, she wins the quarterfinal at the Australian Open, now goes through to play against China's Li Na in the semifinal on Thursday. And of course, the reason, as you know, your name's linked to it is because it's the first time it's happened in 30 years since you did it at the U.S. Open way back in 1984. You must be terribly proud of Eugenie Bouchard, both as a Canadian and as someone who's followed her progress since she was very young.
Well, interesting. So it's funny that you say that because Nick Saviano, her coach, lived on the east coast of Florida, where we spent probably 15 years of our life training. I had seen her since she was about 12, and just to see the development of her game over the years, and just her attitude and her spunk, and she's such a beautiful girl inside and out. Just seeing it, not even knowing her very well, it's such a great achievement, and I can't tell you how excited I am to know that this puts Canadian tennis, women's Canadian tennis, as we know the men are doing amazing, back on the map. So, and she's only 19, and that's what makes it even more special.
Do you know that when Li Na played in the semifinal last year, and Li Na, folks, if you don't know, is from China, and is now ranked in the top 5 in the world. She had 50 million people from China tune in to see her semifinal match last year. It shows what kind of an effect that a really top-notch player can have to a country that hasn't been used to having top-notch players. I bring that Li Na correlation up because Eugenie Bouchard is getting maybe not 50 million people because we only have 32 million in the country, Carling, but she's getting all kinds of attention, and I hope she can have the same effect that Li Na has had on her country.
Well, you know what? I'm sure she will. It's very similar to the fact like Bjorn Borg put Swedish tennis back on the map when he did the amazing things he did. And I think it's fabulous. I mean, there's nothing, especially since it's a sport which you have to win. It's not just a team sport. Well, obviously you need your team on the sidelines, but it really gives the nation a boost, not just for tennis, just for people really getting back into the game again, because it is such a great sport, and I feel that just coming up, back to Toronto recently, it's not that it's been neglected so much for the women, but the men certainly have, activated to a whole different level again. So it's wonderful to see, especially someone that has worked so hard, and the Canadians probably haven't followed her junior career and see, she's been, around the world and back, and so you love to see anyone achieve that kind of success, and she's going to have the semifinals. I tell you, it's going to show. It's going to be tough. I mean,
talk a little bit about that because Carling Bassett joins me. If you are wondering who that voice is that you've heard so much before, talk about that because now she's in rarefied air. She's in air that only you breathed as a Canadian all those years ago. Li Na is going to be a very tough opponent. Beat her 2 years ago when she was still a junior. But, I will say to her defense that Carl Hale, who you know was on earlier today, she loves the big stage. She's not overawed by it. She likes being on the big stage, which is huge in itself for a 19-year-old girl. And she feels now that she's learned from that lesson and she's much more experienced and ready to tackle Li Na.
Well, I would hope so. The fact that she's been so successful in her junior career too helps when you do get on the big stage because it's not so overwhelming, and you're comforted by it. And she's outgoing. But Li Na is a totally different player than
Ivanovic.
I always have such a tough time saying
that's all right.
Ivanovic, has a major weakness, which we know is her backhand, and she made a lot of errors. And Li Na is solid on both sides. Not to say that she has huge weapons, but you're going to have to beat her mentally and physically. And it'll be interesting to see. And, I'm sure Lee Na feels a tremendous amount of pressure on her behalf also, especially from her country and being ranked in top 5. So I think it gives an edge to us in some ways, but she certainly is going to have to up her game just a notch. And that's just my opinion speaking. But it can easily be done. It's going to be an exciting match, and I can't wait to watch it. That's for sure.
Goes on Thursday, Carling, and as we said before, great to have a couple of people who are bringing a lot of attention to the game that you've known and loved so well. And Carling, tell me this from your experience because you lived it. Would you agree that there's a huge difference between bursting onto the pro scene when you're 15 or 16 years old, like so many, like yourself and Tracy and others who did during that era, and turning pro when you're, say, 19 years old? Like, there's a world of difference in experience and things you've grown up with as far as not just tennis is concerned, but as a very conscientious young girl. Do you agree with me? There's a world of difference between 16 and 19 for women?
I mean, you just have to look really at what's happened to a lot of us that turned pro at 15 or 16. But, I think the WTA has done a great job with that. They've limited learning from us, the ones that had not played into our, early 30s, et cetera, professionally. They've actually come out with a law that they prevent you from actually playing a certain amount of pro tournaments at 15 or 16, which I think is very healthy. I mean, it was a big issue at the beginning. It was activated, but I think it just goes. You're ready when you're 19. I mean, the amount of hours and tournaments and you're mature. Obviously, your maturity level.
You're a young woman by that time as opposed to a young girl.
Yeah. Well, I think you grow up pretty quickly. Also, moves faster than a normal 15-year-old. I don't feel like I was 15 when I was 15.
Right.
What happened to me was I became such a success overnight. I mean, going from winning the juniors and then to my first pro tournament, I go through the qualifying and get to the finals, and have Chris Everett.
Exactly right, Carling. Even if you'd spent your lifetime growing up on tennis courts with shorts and skirts on and tennis gear, which became de guerre to you, as I said to people earlier on, just consider when you walk by your local high school, a couple of 15 and 16-year-old girls walking down the sidewalk, watch them giggle, watch what they're talking about, watch how self-conscious they are, watch them texting their boyfriends, listen to what they're talking about, and just imagine suddenly them being thrown on a court somewhere with the eyes of the world watching them, how conscientious they'd be just of what they were wearing, never mind how the hell they were playing their tennis match. And that's something that people forget about when they watch people like you who was playing tennis so young as a 15 or 16-year-old kid. I mean, you're so conscientious about your braces or your teeth or how you look or what your legs look like, never mind the bloody game you're trying to play. Is that not right?
I agree with you. The difference, though, I think, and in fact, with my situation is I was thrown into the Ford Modeling Agency at the same time. So here I was, I thought my body was fine. Okay, right? I mean, I was around athletes all the time.
Right.
Then when I was thrown in with Ford Modeling, and I had my own clothing lines, then I was surrounded by these girls that were just like extremely thin, and then they're constantly told how beautiful they are, etc. And that's where I think I fell into the trap more so than if I would have been kept in just the element of doing my sponsorships and contracts, not through modeling, through such a big agency. I don't think I would have made that transition into having the eating disorders as if I hadn't been exposed to that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Listen, Carling Bassett, one thing I'll tell you about Eugenie, and I'll put on my old director of physical education hat here, she's fit. I mean, I watched her playing in 103 degrees heat early this morning, and, a lot of the guys are wilting by the wayside. Guys are sweating profusely. You can tell when you're lean and you're fit the way that you command yourself on a court in that kind of heat, and she never showed any signs of it. She wasn't sweating profusely, so she's got herself in great shape, which is going to stand her good stead, because it really is a trial of just dealing with the weather as much playing against your opponent in that kind of heat. A lot of people cannot imagine what it's like to try and go out and play tennis for 2.5 hours in 103 degrees of heat.
Well, you get used to it, because especially when you train in Florida in the humidity, and remember, a match really isn't 2.5 hours. I mean, you have that in between, so it's really it's much harder training than it is actually our fit. And for me, that was never such a problem.